Buechner, United States Navy, 15 years on active duty and 15 years in the Navy Reserve. Well, I joined the Navy right after high school in 1974, and I had gotten an appointment to the United States Naval Academy, and I had an interest in the ocean, although one wouldn't generally suspect that from someone who'd grown up in Indiana. Our boot camp essentially consisted of what we call plebe summer at the Naval Academy. It was in Annapolis, Maryland. It was June. It was very hot, and we did a lot of exercises, a lot of group type activities that were basically under certain amounts of pressure. And the intention of all that was to get people to work together as a unit and lose the individual identity to a certain extent and identify more with the group of people that you were there working with. And so that lasted in an intense manner one entire summer, and then the rest of the academic year, first year of school. The first 5 years was on the destroyer, and I worked in Navy recruiting for a while, and then in the Naval Training Center in San Diego, and then left active duty and joined the Navy Reserves. And after that, I was the executive officer of an assault craft unit, and worked in a unit that did some consulting work for the commander of the U.S. Pacific Fleet in Pearl Harbor. And after a little bit of that, about 10 years of that, I was recalled to active duty again, and I spent 5 years in Washington, D.C. with various Department of Defense offices, including the Inspector General's office, and then came back and did a couple more assignments before retiring just last year. Being in the Middle East at the time we were there, that was during the Iranian hostage crisis, and we were actually deployed off the coast of Iran. At the time, the rescue effort had been attempted, and with some disappointing results, so we had to move around rather quickly from the position that we were in. And so that was something that was memorable. And then later on, after I was recalled in 2000, was in Washington, D.C. during the attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. And so a lot of that was very close. It turns out I was in Washington, D.C., and my youngest brother was in New York, right across from the World Trade Center, and so we were able to connect with each other on that day and make sure that each of us was okay. Working with assault craft, I had a group of guys that were all Vietnam veterans, and half of them worked for a Detroit diesel company and so forth, and we had been assigned to a mission where we were going out to a place where we had stored supplies and weapons and things that would be taken ashore in an amphibious assault. And this is when the military had started contracting out a lot of its support work. And so we got out to this ship, and our unit wasn't even supposed to be there. We were just a bunch of guys that were in Cleveland, Ohio, that had used to run assault craft in Vietnam. And we came out there and found out that all the boats that they had, they weren't using them correctly. They hadn't been maintained properly, and so on and so forth. And so, what's going on with this? Why aren't you using these? Well, we haven't figured out anything to do with it. And these old vets just kind of perked up. I say old, they're my age. But we were a lot older than the active duty guys that were around us. And they thought, these guys are a bunch of reservists. What do they know? They don't understand this mission and so forth. And I sent those guys in there, about 20 of them, and they fixed those assault craft up, and they got them. They got those diesels humming like they'd never run before. And they figured out that there were logistic problems, that they couldn't get things from ship to ship and from ship to shore, and they picked up that mission and figured out how to do it. And I was just so proud of those guys, and it just, to me, it shows why the reserve makes the military so strong, because it takes people out of civilian life that are really good at doing all the things that we get a chance to do, and brings it into an environment that tends to get a little bit rigid at times. We were trying to create an Inspector General's office in Iraq, which is a country who is struggling today with the understanding of integrity and efficiency and doing business basically in a democratic type of model. They're not quite used to that, and so we had sent people over from the Inspector General's office to try to teach them how to do this. And this was about the time that there was a very unfortunate incident that happened in the Abu Ghraib prison. And basically it was a couple of folks that were not properly supervised and did some things that were really unconscionable, and I think we all learned a very deep lesson from how that happened. But the point is, we had flown into Iraq and gone through Afghanistan to try to get a sense of what had really happened with that. And in the process, we got a chance to meet with 37 members of the new Iraqi parliament in a small room in the old Iraqi convention center. And we were in the green zone in Iraq, and flew in Black Hawk helicopters and did a little ground fire while we were coming and going. So you kind of knew it was, we called it the Wild East at that time. It was fairly shortly after combat operations had wrapped up. And being in the room with those 37 people who were all scared to death because the insurgents were out trying to pick off anybody that looked like they were part of the new government, and yet they were convinced that their country could have a better future than they had known in their past, and they were committed to do it, but they were scared to death. And it was, in a way, it had to be like sitting in the hall in Philadelphia when our founding fathers were pledging their sacred honor to a very uncertain cause that they were about ready to undertake. And a lot of them, of course, did lose their lives and their fortune and many other things as a result of that effort. And so being there was very profound. But the next day, we got underway for Abu Ghraib prison, and we were looking at facilities and what had happened, and there were a whole flock of birds that had kind of lined up on the top, and I took a picture of that, and I said, I'm going to go back when we come back from this and show people that they're all the jailbirds in Abu Ghraib prison. Most powerful experiences in the service, that you are with people, and you're, again, I mentioned going through the training at the academy, you kind of break down your individual needs and wants and so forth, and you think more in terms of what's best for the group and what you can do for the guy next to you, because you may have to rely on him or her the next time you turn around. So the ability to look out for each other and to act as a unit is a huge thing. And as perhaps as a result of that, we formed some very deep friendships over time, and I've been very blessed to have good friends that I've met along the way, both officers and members of the enlisted service. If you're an officer, you're only as good as your troops are, and I've formed, again, very deep friendships. We're sending young men and women, more women than we've ever done before, out to front lines of combat, and they are going through experiences there in a particularly inhospitable part of the world. Is very different from this country, the things that we're used to. They're often in an area where people do not want them to be there, and yet they're there because they believe that what they're doing is right, and that what they're doing is helpful to the population of those nations that we're operating in. And they are, our kids and our brothers and sisters, and they are basically, they're America in those parts of the world. And when they come back from that experience, they have been changed. No matter what they've been exposed to, the fact that they've been in those places and been under those conditions, they're different. They've changed, and we need to understand how to be compassionate in welcoming them to be back among us as returned warriors, and understand what that means. And it's a very profound thing. It's not sympathy, it's not charity, it's basically understanding and acceptance, and we're learning more about how to do that every day, and that's the message I would be interested in conveying.